if you can't decry Israel the way that the socialist Spice Girls want you to do, if you can't call it a apartheid state and say anti-Semitic things the way that Ilhan Omar or AOC or Rashida Tlaib is wont to do, then at least you can go after Netanyahu, because he's not a popular figure among the left. And so let's make it about him rather than about the Palestinians or the Israelis as a way to middle both Palestinian and Israeli voters here in America. And that's exactly what he did.
On the Israeli side, the U.S. government should demand that Israel conduct itself with a future two-state solution in mind. We should not be forced into a position of unequivocally supporting the actions of an Israeli government that include bigots who reject the idea of a Palestinian state.
Bigots. Oh, let's play some identity politics, huh? I hear what you're saying. I mean, I feel what you're doing. I'm picking up what you're putting down there, Chucky. So since we shouldn't be beholden to them, we should get rid of them.
5 months into this conflict, it is clear that Israelis need to take stock of the situation and ask, must we change course? At this critical juncture, I believe a new election is the only way to allow for a healthy and open decision-making process about the future of Israel, at a time when so many Israelis have lost their confidence in the vision and direction of their government. I also believe a majority of the Israeli public will recognize the need for change, and I believe that holding a new election, once the war starts to wind down, would give Israelis an opportunity to express their vision for the post-war future. Of course, the United States cannot dictate the outcome of an election, nor should we try. That is for the Israeli public to decide, a public that I believe understands better than anybody that Israel cannot hope to succeed as a pariah opposed by the rest of the world. As a democracy, Israel has the right to choose its own leaders, and we should let the chips fall where they may. But the important thing is that Israelis are given a choice. There needs to be a fresh debate about the future of Israel after October 7th. In my opinion, that is best accomplished by holding an election.
So we don't dictate the outcomes of their elections. We just dictate the timing. Is that what you're suggesting, Pagliacci? Obviously, he is suggesting that. That's why he was specific to say we don't dictate the outcomes, but you better hold one. Would there be purse strings attached to that, in your opinion, Chucky Schumer? The other thing, too, about that, Israel can't expect to survive, thrive as a pariah. Why would Israel be a pariah? Who said anything about Israel being a pariah state? I mean, it may be a pariah state to radical Islamic states that and non-state actors that seek its destruction, but that's already built in. Why would it be a pariah state? Because Western Europe is playing the same politics that you're playing there, Pagliacci? For more on that matter and a few other geopolitical issues, we're pleased to be joined by Daniel DePetris, fellow at Defense Priorities and a syndicated foreign affairs columnist at the Tribune, Chicago Tribune, that is, and Newsweek. Daniel DePetris, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Dan, Amy, thank you for having me this morning.
I also don't think that with respect to Schumer's call for an Israeli election, I don't think his characterization of where Israelis are with the prosecution of the campaign against Hamas is exactly accurate. Bibi may not be wildly popular, but I think the posture of eradicating Hamas and not stopping until that job is done to everyone's satisfaction is fairly popular.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I think generally speaking, if you look at the recent surveys, there's Israelis across the political spectrum agree that Hamas needs to be destroyed to the extent that it can. I think the difference is basically how to do that, right? And you have some people even within Bibi Netanyahu's coalition who would prefer to have a more diplomatic approach, meaning get the hostages out first and then prosecute the war. And I think a lot of people are concerned that Bibi is prioritizing the destruction of Hamas over getting the remaining, Israeli hostages out of Gaza. So I think that's where the main dispute lies, both within the government and outside of it.
Well, what about the American hostages? Do we know if they're even still alive?
Yeah, we don't. I mean, supposedly we have about 6 or 7, I think is the count, American hostages still in Gaza. We have very few information coming from the administration about, their well-being. I can't sit here today and tell you if they're alive or dead, but we can only hope that they are alive. But I think there's approximately 130, I believe, hostages left in Gaza, and at least 30 of them have been declared dead one way or the other. So it's an issue that is very time sensitive, and I think Bibi knows that, and I think ultimately the administration knows that as well.
You can't listen to Schumer's call for an election in Israel and not focus on the domestic politics he's playing with it, with respect to Muslims in Dearborn who lodged a protest vote against Biden in their primary in Michigan, with respect to these radical, relentless protesters that show up at events for Joe Biden, that show up at a printing house for the New York Times, that block traffic on the streets of major cities. So he's definitely attempting to address those political problems here, isn't he?
I think so. I mean, he's the top Democrat in the Senate, and he's responsible for basically putting the thumb under, trying to go the way the tide is turning. And right now, you have a lot of progressives, even centrist Democrats, who are not at all pleased with Netanyahu as a personality and as a leader, and in terms of his policies. And I think Schumer understands that, and a lot of this is trying to keep his credibility, I think, within the Democratic Party. I think that's a big part of the reason he gave his speech the other day.
Brandon Carr is a Republican member of the FCC, the board of the FCC, Federal Communications Commission, and he weighed in the other night on Laura Ingram's show about the TikTok legislation that passed the House and is pending in the Senate. And here's what he had to say. I want to get your reaction to it.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of concern, particularly on the right, whenever Congress does something these days that can be weaponized against them, because we've been living that for so long. My job as a Republican on the FCC is to sound the alarm on anything that can be used for weaponization. Not only does this bill not give that authority to the president, it doesn't rely on that alone. There are 5 layers of constraints that have been put in here. 1, it cannot be used against any individual. 2, it only applies to entities that are controlled by a foreign adversary government, which is just China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. 3, it's not enough that you're controlled by a foreign adversary, maybe it should be. You also have to separately have a finding of national security, and then there's additional process beyond that. And the remedy, again, is not a unilateral ban, it is a divestment. So this is a very targeted bill, smart legislation.
Smart legislation, Daniel?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, as somebody personally, I'm more of a libertarian. I'm in the Rand Paul school of thought here, where we tend to take things out of proportion and view like free speech issues as sort of a gateway for our adversaries to influence American political opinion. Obviously, the concern here is that the Chinese will use TikTok in some way to influence Americans during the election, but I would remind people that the Chinese have already been doing that, as have the Russians. So it's not like this is some sort of new development. I mean, we know what the Chinese and the Russians are doing, and quite frankly, it's something that the U.S. leaders should prepare for, regardless of whether or not TikTok is divested or forced to sell to a non-Chinese entity. So I'm sort of within the school of thought where we need to kind of sit down and weigh these issues without an emotional basis. Right now, there's a lot of emotion dominating this debate.
I wanted to move over to Haiti because obviously it's in a state of anarchy, but there's still Americans that are trapped there. Does the State Department have any idea how many Americans are there and how they're going to get them out? Because we don't want to turn this into another Afghanistan.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I can tell, we don't know the exact amount of Americans in Haiti. Part of that is because, of course, Americans who are in Haiti have to register with the government and make sure, the government knows where they are for safety reasons. But the administration has essentially rushed additional security to the embassy in Port-au-Prince, 2 separate waves, twice this week, actually. So there's obviously a huge concern here that the embassy is under threat, and I think you put the nail on the head here. They understand, the last thing they need in an election year is a catastrophe at another embassy in a third world country. So that's essentially it's preparatory work, and it's also trying to cover your bases and make sure that to the extent that you can guard U.S. property, they're doing that.
Well, I mean, the Canadians said no to helping out. The French, Macron said no. So they're having this Kenyan army possibly come.
Yeah.
And what kind of craziness is that?
Yeah, the bottom line here is nobody wants to touch Haiti. The administration has lobbied the Canadians to lead a kind of a multinational police force to get control of the situation, and the Canadians basically told us to walk away. We're not doing it. You're not doing it either, by the way, United States. So why you're asking us to do it? So Kenya is basically the country that has volunteered to lead this mission. And the problem, of course, is the Kenyans have not even started their deployment process yet. So it's the whole situation is just a mess, quite frankly. And the political situation is abysmal. You have 1 in 10 Haitians, 10% of the population, close to famine, and the gangs basically run the country at this point. That's where we are.
Yeah, as we found out yesterday from our friends down in Port-au-Prince, or normally down in Port-au-Prince, at Food for the Poor, that one gang leader that's getting so much attention, who goes by the nickname Barbecue, was a former police officer down there, just to put an exclamation point on how chaotic things are. Daniel DePetris is a fellow at Defense Priorities and syndicated foreign affairs columnist at the Chicago Tribune and Newsweek. Daniel DePetris, thanks for joining us as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's like a hot, steaming cup of information to start your day. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
If you want the best meats and seafood that you can't ever find in the butcher aisle of a grocery store, you need to check out my guy Chris with Second City Prime. Second City Prime has scoured the world for the best meats and seafood on the planet. Learn how to discover them all for yourself at secondcityprime.com.